Good morning and welcome to One Baha'i, that regular show where, I just sit back and talk a little bit about the Baha'i faith. It's nothing official, just my own individual perspective. So today, actually this whole week, I would like to talk about the advent of divine justice. And I'm going to focus on three things. The spiritual prerequisites, as the Guardian says, of success. The spiritual prerequisites of success. He says that we have what he calls three spiritual weapons that we can use in this spiritual battle we're in. There they are. He says, these requirements are none other than a high sense of moral rectitude in their social and administrative activities, absolute chastity in their individual lives, and complete freedom from prejudice in their dealings with peoples of a different race, class, creed, or color. Because of what's been going on in the news, we've heard a little bit about the third one, well, quite a lot about the third one, in all sorts of Baha'i fora. I wanted to start by talking about the other two. Now, the first one that he addresses is this high sense of moral rectitude. And he says that it is specially, though not exclusively, directed to their elected representatives. So he says it's really directed to all of us, more focused on the elected representatives, but it is for everybody. And what I find fascinating is that he starts by saying this rectitude of conduct, with its implications of justice, equity, truthfulness, honesty, fair-mindedness, reliability, and trustworthiness, must distinguish every phase of the life of the Baha'i community. That's the part that I wanted to focus on right now. We're reading so much online about all sorts of opinions on how to handle all these things and how to show each of them. But I want to focus on a slightly different thing. I've written about it in the past, but I want to talk about it a little bit now. You see, in geometry, there is this notion that you want to be as precise as possible. When Euclid put forth his 5 postulates, the 5 things that he took for given, the things he took for granted, the first 4 postulates in Euclid's geometry are very simple and straightforward. There was really no question. It's got things like a line is the straightest distance between 2 points. Pretty simple. But it was the 5th postulate that was very convoluted. I'm not going to go into it. But the question for a long time was, could it be simplified? Because if it could, if it overlapped any of the other postulates, then it was considered sloppy. So what somebody did is they said, okay, if it doesn't overlap, then it's good. If it does overlap, that means that you can contradict it, take its opposite, and it will not work because it'll contradict another postulate. And they tried that. They took the opposite of that 5th postulate and built an entirely new geometry system out of it, non-Euclidean geometry. And what this did is it proved that the 5th postulate was completely separate unto itself. It did not overlap in its definition. I mean, of course, in its application it does, but it didn't overlap in its definition. When I was reading these implications, for some reason I asked myself, was the Guardian as precise as possible? He was very particular in the way that he used his words. Come on, George. I started recording, so my cat wants to come up naturally. Hi. So what I did is I went through them and I said, well, is it possible to think of a situation in which you show one of these virtues but not the others. And I found that Shoghi Effendi was astonishingly precise. None of these words overlap in their definitions. And I noticed that as I began to realize that, my awareness of these different words became heightened. And I started sharing these ideas more and more. And a lot of people have come up with some really astonishing insights by realizing that these words are actually separate from each other. So I wanted to go through them, talk about their definitions a little bit. I have my definitions here. And I wanted to show how a few of them don't overlap. Because I find it a fascinating exercise that has an application in so many other areas. So the first word he uses is justice. Now, justice is when you get what you deserve. You do something good, you get a reward. You do something bad, you get punished. Equity is when you get what you need to be successful. Now, the fascinating thing about equity is a lot of people think it's equality, and it isn't. I mean, if you started at the same point, then equity would be equality if you all required the same things. But you see, in society, people are not starting at the same point. People with a darker skin tone start with a social disadvantage. So equity is helping even that playing field. It's giving them more of a head start, more of an advantage to counteract the disadvantage that they are being burdened with. You can have justice without having equity. You can have equity without having justice. But really, in the end, it's not true justice. It's not true equity. Truthfulness. Truthfulness is that which accords with reality. It's got absolutely nothing to do with you or what's inside of you. It is completely external. Honesty is that which you believe. A lot of people have a hard time with that, so I had to find an example that worked. If somebody were to jokingly say, "Oh, snicker, snicker, meat is 55 years old," well, they would not be truthful, and they would not be honest. If they believed that I was 55, and they said, "Well, meat is 55," they would be truthful, but they would be honest, but not truthful. If they believed that I was actually that age. If they believed that I was 55 and said, "Snicker, snicker, meat is only 52," they would be truthful by accident. If they actually asked me and I told them, then they would be honest and truthful if they said I was 52. So you see, the two are not the same. One would hope, one would strive to be both truthful and honest, but you can be one without the other. Fair-mindedness. Fair-mindedness is being impartial, treating everybody similarly. So, in the Black Lives Matter movement, we're seeing very clearly that, well, African Americans are not treated the same as white Americans. It's that simple. There is not fair-mindedness in the situation. You can be fair-minded without showing equity. You can be fair-minded without being honest. You see, one would hope that you would show forth justice and equity and truthfulness and honesty and be fair-minded at the same time. But the fascinating thing is that you don't have to be. The sixth term that he uses is reliability. To be dependable. People can rely on you. The last one is trustworthiness. To be worthy of someone's trust. It's interesting that trusting is a virtue, and trustworthiness is a virtue. You may be trustworthy, but somebody may not trust you. And that requires a lot of work to demonstrate your trustworthiness. You see, from what I have noticed down with this whole Black Lives Matters movement, is there are a lot of very trustworthy police officers. There are a lot of trustworthy individuals on both sides. But the African American community, in many ways like the Indigenous community in Canada, has been betrayed so many times that the trust is no longer there. So the big question is, what can someone who is trustworthy do to demonstrate their trustworthiness to hopefully earn that trust again? Trust is what you give someone. Trustworthiness is how they feel towards you. I can trust you. I have to be trustworthy. I don't want to go into the details of any of these today. It's already been 11 minutes. I just wanted to talk about those definitions, those implications, as he says, of this rectitude of conduct. So the question is, for me, how can I demonstrate each of these, knowing that they are not the same? If I mistakenly think that truthfulness is honesty, then I may actually be missing developing one of them. But when I'm aware that they are all different, then I need to work on all 7 of them. And as Shoghi Effendi says, this constitutes the bedrock on which the security of all teaching plans must ultimately rest. So thank you very much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. If you have examples of how somebody could be one of these 7 but not the other, I would love to read them, because these examples, these negative examples, help me talk about it. And I've heard from many people that it helps other people talk about it too. So please, if you have an example where somebody can be one but not the other, I would love to read it. In the meantime, I hope you have a wonderful day. If you enjoy this video, please hit the like button, hit the share, hit subscribe, whatever you feel like. And in the meantime, we'll talk tomorrow.